But what Tim did today at Trojans Wire, Tuesday, he wrote a very good story about how USC did so many things well, and yet, there's so much room for improvement. So USC gets a win over LSU, a big-time win that improves the team's overall playoff chances, and yet there is so much for this coaching staff to work on with these players. The ceiling is a lot higher now than it was a week ago. I mean, now we some of us thought that the ceiling was high. Tim thought the ceiling was higher than I did. Okay, I'm gonna admit that. Like Tim nailed it more than I did. No problem with admitting that for me. But now we can see. Now there's actual proof that this team can really grow and evolve into something special. But you want to read Tim's story at Trojans Wire, how great game, and yet there's still plenty to clean up. And if this team does clean up on aisle 4, we could be dealing with something really special in late November, early December.
It's just amazing the way these guys coming off just a hard-fought win. The first thing they're talking about is comments just simple like that. Like Miller's right out of Miller's mouth, just kind of saying that we know we're better. We know there's things we need to work on, etc. It just tells you the mindset of this team. They're not happy. Miller flat out said, our goal isn't to beat LSU. It doesn't stop here. This US team is hyper focused. If you guys on TV, looking at Lincoln Riley, looking at Miller and Moss when they're down, 3 points with minute 47 left, and I don't know what it is about Miller and Moss, but he never looks remotely rattled. He always looks completely composed. Now, I will tell you, if you look at some pictures, now all that emotion came out of Miller after the game, but when the team needed him to just take control, the leader that he is, just a steel-eyed look in his face like, we're going to go score a touchdown. And it's been a while. It really has been a while since you had a feel that your defense is going to be able to get that stop. SC defense, it doesn't really get all the credit because if you remember, they held them to a field goal, which allowed USC to come down on the next play and just take the game over. There were a couple times where USC looked like they were reeling, but then the defense dug deep and got stops. And that's something for me more than almost anything else was USC's ability to consistently get stops. They looked a bit shaky in the third quarter, but one of my biggest concerns and why I was kind of throwing these random loss in there towards the end of the season was, the one doubt I did have was the depth on the defensive line. And they really stuck to the run, almost to their detriment. They kept running. They wanted to prove something. And as the game went on, it just seemed like the defensive line even got more stout and stronger. So that is one concern we could probably cross off the list, you guys. The fact that USC does not have that depth. And Kobe Pepe played a great game inside. Anthony Lucas, Nate Clifton. You go down the line. Bear obviously had a game. I cannot wait to see what the limit is. Let's see if we can get through Utah State healthy, get into Ann Arbor, and show the Wolverines what we got.
Yeah, well, in terms of the depth, and Tim, you were right. I was wrong. Once again, check mark Tim. But the other thing we need to do to just be clear about is the depth might be fine as long as the injury bug doesn't hit. That's the thing. If the injury bug hits, then we could have some fresh questions. But as long as this group does stay intact, yes, the depth is there. Would definitely agree with that. And I was not as convinced of that before the season, to be sure. And one thing about Utah State, obviously we'll spend more time talking about LSU as we go along. But just one very quick thought, looking forward to Utah State. Boy, now this is a game in which you want to run the ball, right? Because if you run the ball and you can run it successfully, what does that mean? Shorter game, fewer plays, lower risk of injury, which is exactly what you want before the Michigan game. So every reason in the world for USC to go to a run-heavy approach against Utah State. We'll talk more about everything, but just want to put that note on the record right now before we go forward.
Yeah, and you're going to see a lot of it's going to be good because also you're going to get a lot of so you'll have your starters resting up. But you're also going to have a lot of those young guys getting some valuable reps together because at some point, we keep talking about the depth of the team, and I do believe there is some serious depth of freshmen and underclassmen. Once they get a little more their feet wet in college football, get used to both, Lincoln Riley's system and Danton Lynn's system, that's going to be even an additional depth that I do believe, if USC is the team we think that they could be, if they're having dreams and thoughts of going to have a 16, 17 game season at some point here, then they're going to need a lot of depth. But I would tell you, I was called crazy. There was a lot of things we couldn't talk about. If you guys remember, though, after that scrimmage, I said, look, I don't know how to say it because, quite frankly, I can't say it. But watching that defense, I wouldn't say dominate the offense because they didn't. But the way they were able to stand up to the offense you guys watched on Sunday and go toe-to-toe with them, I knew that a lot had changed. Anybody that's had watched the look in these guys' faces, the concentration, the way they practice, the speed in which they practice, you knew that this was going to be a different looking USC defense. But I'll tell you, even that, when I saw them playing in that fourth quarter, getting those stops, that really was a bit of it was shocking me. I really thought, oh shoot, here it comes in the third quarter. It just looked a little bit like how everyone was predicting it. But it's a testament to this team. We're going back and saying the added size is great, but that added size, are they going to have the stamina to get into the fourth quarter with carrying all that extra weight? Clearly, the answer to that was yes. Again, Matt, I don't know about you, but it did appear to me that they actually got stronger as the game went on.
Well, I mean, there was like a 10-minute window, right? Midway through the second half when LSU with John Emery, leaned on USC's defensive front, began to pound the ball, began to gash USC a little bit. But like after that 10-minute window, USC was able to just bring this game back. And that just speaks to the character of this team, right? Like it was you could feel, and you kind of spoke to this, like you could feel the snowball beginning to get bigger and beginning to roll down the hill. Nope, USC stops it before that momentum really became, an avalanche. Like, it's not easy to do that. It's not easy when, you've played your butt off for 2.5 quarters and the offense leaves points on the board. Should have scored some more touchdowns. You wrote about Kyron Hudson. He made the 2 circus catches, and obviously the second one helped USC win the game. So, like, he delivered when it ultimately mattered. But there were 2 balls. You wrote about this at Trojans Wire. Right on your hands, man. You gotta bring those in. At least one of the 2. Like, first time, okay, guy poked it away. Second time, you need to be able to box out that defender. So if you're, but again, big picture, you're the defense. You're the USC defense. You played so well, but the offense hasn't scored nearly as many points as it should have. It would have been so easy to fold right then. Would have been so easy to just briefly lament your fate, and that little lapse could have just caused everything to collapse. No, this team was ready. It was able to stay the course, stand firm. Just an immense display of really the mental toughness just as much as the physical. We need to keep that in mind. Physically, USC held up in this game, but that it never mentally gave way. Right after that one really bad possession on defense for LSU to get the 17-13 lead, to then find a spine and a backbone. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. How did we ever see that kind of resilience under a non-Sam Darnold, Clay Helton team in 7 years? Kind of hard to come up with one. And did we ever see that last year in the second half of the season under Alex Grinch? Few and far between. In terms of those instances. Like, we did see that in the Oregon State game 2 years ago, in the early part of the Riley Grinch years, but it's been rare to see USC find that kind of spine when everything seemed to be about to crash down around the Trojans. That mental toughness, man, if we can keep that, if we can retain that, this team is going to go to the playoff. So it's a big if, but like, this team showed it could be that resilient. So hopefully that stays in play the whole season here at USC.